Well, it's another gloomy and oppressive day here in the OK State. So I thought, what better time to talk about the dark and dirty and gloomy aspects of the spiritual journey, known as the dark night of the soul. But there are two aspects of this dark night. It is the dark night of the mind, or slash also known as dark night of the senses, and then the dark night of the soul. So I really like talking about the kind of gloomy and dark parts of the spiritual journey, because you see everyone out there teaching on YouTube and everyone seems all glowy and shiny and like life is wonderful, and you're sitting there all curled up, in the fetal position crying, and you think, what's wrong with you? Well, I'm here to tell you, I don't care who the teacher is. They're experiencing dark nights. They still experience dark nights. Okay, everyone goes through it. They just don't talk about it, and I want to talk about it. Okay, so the first dark night we're going to talk about is dark night of the senses, or dark night of the mind. And let's just say at the beginning of your spiritual awakening, jumping out there and diving into all this stuff, you are inundated with feel good experiences. I mean, everything is wonderful, right? You're just like, oh, I'm growing, I'm learning, and all kinds of synchronicities and the numbers and woohoo, and this great meditation, and all this stuff is great. And all of that is like your initiation period. It is, it's the carrot, okay? And at some point along this journey, all those feel-good experiences are not going to be feeling so good. And you can equate it to, it's like you're called the beginner. You've been initiated, but we're still at the beginning stage of our journey, and it is the beginner or child is no longer held in the arms of the mother, or getting nourishment from her bosom and all these beautiful, loving, feeling good experiences. At some point, the mother must turn the child away from all of these delights, because if you are ready for the journey, then you are entering into like a proficiency stage. It's a testing of your virtues, okay? Testing of your commitment to the journey this lifetime. So dark night of the mind or senses is mostly, if not all, about the mind. And you are still working from within the ego mind, okay? And because you have yet to truly awaken. So dark night of the mind is prior to an awakening, or also known as self-realization. So all of this is happening from within the mind. This causes a great deal of suffering, but it's ego suffering, okay? So the first thing that kind of happens when you start on this spiritual journey is we take on more images, self-images. Oh, now I'm on the spiritual journey, and now I have to act spiritual, I have to do certain things. And when you start this testing phase, all of these images that you've just now taken on, and all the things that you think that the spiritual journey is about, begins to be dismantled in you. So I have a list here. I have some notes here, so if you see me looking over here. And this is where the 7 deadly sins come in. And by the way, all the information I'm getting is from, number one, my personal experience. So whatever I talk about, I totally relate to and have experienced. But I also have gotten it from Dark Night of the Soul, that was written by Saint John of the Cross. And in this book, there's references to many of the disciples in the Bible, how they all talk about going through these stages of dark night of the senses and dark night of the soul. So when you're in dark night of the senses or mind, you go through a testing of your virtues, known as the 7 deadly sins. And so the first one that you might encounter is spiritual pride. And by the way, I have fallen victim to most, if not all of them, and most all of us will. At some level or another, okay? Spiritual pride. And this starts right away. You know, people say, oh, I'm on the spiritual journey, and they start teaching too early. They immediately leave the student position and take on the teaching role. They start setting up businesses. They can become, you, me, we become judgmental and judgmental and prejudiced against others who are not on the spiritual journey or can't wake up. We condemn our teachers. This spiritual pride leads you to condemn your teacher for not, recognizing your value and worthiness. I'm just going to leave this teacher because they don't understand me. They're not praising me for my good works. This is very, very typical. And they seek out other teachers that they think will align with them and tell them how wonderful they are. And they really reject and talk badly about the teachers who show them their illusion or delusions, okay, how attached they are to the ego. I know I did the same thing. They would rather confess. So when spiritual pride is about, you would not dare confess your darkness, your secret, your errors to anybody around you because you're holding this image, right? So you would rather confess your errors to strangers rather than the teachers because, heaven forbid, you are seen for what you are. There is a tendency to make light of your imperfections. Oh, I didn't really need that's just nothing. Oh, I don't know what I was doing. And this spiritual pride comes very quickly, right? Because we've slapped on this image now. I'm on the spiritual journey. And immediately the ego, look, here's the thing. The ego knows what's going on. It goes, oh shit, this one's on the spiritual journey. It knows that eventually it's going to meet its demise. So it starts really acting up, okay? So this may not be your nature, but it happens. So immediately the ego will say, oh, well, now I'm a saint. When we start condemning others, as well as really condemning the self when anger or impatience starts rising up in us. So you get really angry at yourself. This is the ego telling you have to be of a certain image, okay? And all of this first deadly sin of spiritual pride is to bring the student back to the student position and humble you, okay? I made the mistake too, years ago, probably even now, trying to teach people, oh, I will be a life coach or something. Oh God, it was terrible. And I will tell you that many things do not work out during this time. Anyway, let's see, the next one is spiritual avarice. So when when you when humility starts coming back in, when things aren't working out as you thought, um, then you start, this avarice, spiritual avarice comes in, and you start turning away from all things spiritual as they cannot find comfort in the spiritual things that they once did. So this is another deadly sin. These are all testing your virtues. Can you remain devoted to the path? Okay. And then there's spiritual luxury. And this has to do with more sensual or sexual pleasures, because if and when Kundalini starts rising, you feel that energy, that sexual energy. And so many people and teachers are out there teaching tantric. I mean, this has been going on for years, and it's all about, oh, let's have sex and we'll reach higher states of consciousness. Or there is diving into more of the sensual pleasures rather than dealing with the Kundalini in the appropriate manner. So spiritual luxury is pleasures arising from the Kundalini. And let's see what else. Oh, and it says, and really kind of hanging on or using this, your aura, this higher vibrational energy. It can be a romantic or a what would you say, like a sexual attractor. You have charisma, right? And you indulge now in the seeking of love relationships. So it says here, as the love of God in man, the human, excuse me, as the love of God in man grows, the human love cools and is forgotten. So it's saying in the beginning, the spiritual luxury, we take this spiritual love that is rising in us to find partners and have great sexual encounters or things like that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 4, deadly sin is anger. When the high spiritual experiences begin to diminish, anger takes hold. The student now becomes angry with himself and angry with God, angry at everything. Okay, so that's one of the fourth deadly sin. The fifth deadly sin is spiritual gluttony. And this is, again, this is why they call it a dark night of the senses, because this is gluttony for the sensations of spiritual experiences or taking classes. So you're constantly seeking the high. Oh, that felt so good. I have to have more. I have to feel this love. It's that sensual or sensation seeking. And spiritual gluttony. Oh, I got to take all these classes. You understand what gluttony is, but it's also can be spiritual gluttony is about also doing things like extreme penance, extreme meditations, fasting to the extremes, because you think that in order to return the sweetness of God to you, you must, starve yourself or do any kinds of extremes. So that's gluttony. But also spiritual gluttony can also come in the form of your communications. I found this very interesting, but I see it a lot. Spiritual gluttony is also in your communications. You're trying to convey the sweetness of God that you have inside of you in the form of all your flowery words. I'll never have that problem. But because you're trying to convey to others, this might also be a form of pride. you know, the sweetness of God is in you, and you're trying to communicate that to others. I see this so much. Um, Also in your actions, instead of true humility and authenticity. Okay, so that's spiritual gluttony. Number 6 is envy. Being envious of your people in the class, you know, they've had that experience, they're doing that. It's envy. It's easy to understand that one. And then we have spiritual sloth. Lazy, don't want to do your meditations, think you can get away with not practicing anything. All of these things. These are, and that's the number 7. So you have these 7 deadly sins, or 7 testings of the proficience virtues. And it's all testing your humility and your ability to remain in a neutral position and devoted to the journey. Let's see, what else about the dark night of the senses? And here's the thing about the dark night of the senses, dark night of the mind. It's a very difficult position. You can get caught in this trap because the mind, you haven't yet had self-realization or awakened. So the mind is trying to understand self-realization, and it gets a glimpse of it, say in meditation, or you suddenly are witnessing yourself, and the mind will go, I got it. And it doesn't, because the moment it claims it got it, you see, the I that makes up this ego mind will never get self-realization, but it thinks it did. I went through this. And you start talking like it, but then you realize you haven't gotten it. Oh, it's such a thing. So that you're trying to understand self-realization through the mind, but you can never get self-realized through the mind. But the paradox is, if you don't have an understanding of what self-realization is through the mind, then you don't know what you're doing. So it's a really tough thing. It's difficult for the mind. Let's see. Yeah, it's very frustrating to the mind to no end. So we slap on images. So here are some things that happen in your outer world that you can recognize that you're on the initiate path, or the testing of your virtues. You have reverses in your fortune. So remember, at the beginning of the journey, everything's going great. Law of attraction's working. You've got a new group of friends. You're going to start out, I don't know, with a new business. You go, oh, I'm going to coach people. I'm going to wake them up and whatever. Okay. And then all of a sudden you have a reversal in your fortunes. You start losing your friends. Then you have a loss of pleasures in the normal things that brought you peace and comfort and enjoyment. Then suddenly you have loss of reputation. Happened to me. Then you have a lack of success in your goals. Like every new adventure you keep trying, nothing works. Illnesses, you know, it all starts tumbling down. So if you're in that part of the journey, just think about these 7 virtues and see if and where you're being tested. Spiritual pride, this is a huge one, if not one of the hugest ones. Have you taken on an image? Are you beating yourself up for not being perfect? Are you angry? Are you impatient with yourself? Are you getting upset that you're not feeling the extreme highs? These are all testing you. Can you be humble? And are you devoted and committed? And are you willing to stop looking to these outer sensory input arenas or classes or teachers and go within to try to find your comfort? Okay. Okay, what else do I want to say about dark night of the mind?